Hi, welcome to Health Changers Across the Pond and Back. All of us here are passionate about helping people to change their health destiny. Today's topics, we are going to be talking about Gareth. He's going to talk about losing weight and lowering your high blood pressure using the big four. Can't wait to hear that one. Frank is going to be talking about food addiction, one of my big issues. Oh, wow. It's real. And Jayney, the lovely Jayney, she's going to be talking about female hormonal balance. Wow, that's a huge one. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear this one. And I'm going to be talking about the practical side of eating out. So let me introduce our panel today. Dr. Frank Sabatino, he's been plant-based, I don't know, since the Mayflower came over. I don't know. How long, Frank?
Yeah, over 40 years. That's good
Over
enough.
40 years. Okay, good enough.
When dinosaurs roamed the earth, yes.
Exactly. Right up there. And he recently completed a book called WEIGHTLESS, The Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. He's got an online course, Lean for Life, The Science of Effective Weight Loss. And you can find more at drfranksabatino.com. We have the lovely Jayney. She's president of the Complementary Medical Association. She's a leading expert in natural anti-aging and integrative medical health fields. I mean, clearly, doesn't she look amazing? I mean, like, seriously. Like,
thank you. I'm not bad for an old bird.
Right? And she's written several bestsellers. I mean, just incredible books. So do take time. You can find her at www.JayneyGoddard.org. And we have Gareth R., that's important, Davies, and he helps others to reduce or eliminate high blood pressure medication with his no meds method. Okay, and you can find out more from him on his Facebook page, Gareth R. Davies. And I am Jeanne Schumacher, founder of Simply Plant-Based, and I've got quite a few programs to help you transition to a plant-based lifestyle. And we've launched the Pregnancy Advantage to help women get their bodies pregnant ready. You can find more on simplyplantbased.net. And you can connect with all of us. We have a website called healthchangers.net. So let's dive in to our first topic today, which is Gareth. He's going to be talking about losing weight and lowering high blood pressure using the big four.
Well, I'd like to talk about not just the big four, but the eighth wonder of the world. And you may have heard that that's been called compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And I meet many, many people who say, I'm going to take this product, or I'm going to exercise more, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But they don't put them all together. So I just picked four here, but there's other things you can do, as I'm sure you know. But when you put the four together, in my experience, in my personal experience, even lately, which is what has reminded me to give a talk like this, is you'll get better results faster and they're likely to stay. And that's what we all want. We want to lose. We don't just want to lose weight for this month or next month. We want to lose weight and for it to be a lifestyle change, for it to be not just lose weight either, but lower blood pressure, contribute to our overall health. So the four I picked: diet, exercise, sleep, and support. And as I said, there are others. But when we do them all together, we get fantastic results, or we can get fantastic results. So diet, what would I suggest? Well, last time I talked about a whole food plant-based diet with no added salt, oil, or sugar. And that's what I would absolutely recommend. But when you just focus on diet and you still sit in the chair for 24 hours of a day, or you only get 4 or 5 hours sleep every night, you don't have good sleep, and you've got no one to support you, then sometimes the food you don't know what to do, especially when you're first starting out. It can become boring. It can be difficult. You get these questions in your mind: what am I doing the right thing? And so I would recommend, yes, whole food plant-based diet without added salt, oil, or sugar, but also put on top of that, you're going to move, you're going to exercise, and set an exercise goal. Do something you really love, but have it become a habit. And how do you do that? Well, you decide today, not too late, wherever you are in the world. Today, I am going to do X. And you choose, I've said this before, choose something you love to do, even if it's just walking, for 30 minutes a day, or even 5 minutes a day. If you're not walking for 5 minutes a day, start with 5 minutes. Then move to 10, then move to 15. Just have a goal to increase it, but at least hit your target every single day as it becomes a habit. When you combine that with a healthy diet, you'll get even better results. Now, we have an expert, three experts here, but certainly Jayney, I've talked about this before with the sleep recording that you have. I'm still using it. I still got nowhere near the end of it. I've no idea what you say in the final third. I have got once or twice got up to 2/3 of it, but I'm getting great sleep using that tool, and because I'm eating, I think, a healthy diet, and I'm exercising healthily as well. So these all add together and they become the eighth wonder of the world. On top of that, one of the most important things, I believe, is support, especially if you've tried other things before. Most people who want to lower their blood pressure or want to lose weight have tried other things in the past, tried and, quote, failed, because they got some side effects from the medications, or they've lost the weight too quickly and they think, oh, am I losing this too quickly? Is this healthy or not? And they don't know. And it blows their whole goals and their momentum when they get these questions in the back of their mind. So having someone on your side who has been down that road, who's educated in that area, who's capable of coaching or mentoring you, I think is a massive advantage. And you add that to not just one of the other three, but all the other three of, a decent diet, exercising, and a good sleep pattern. And I think you're on the way. But putting all those four things together becomes in my opinion, the ninth wonder of the world. It's compounding your health when you do that. So that's my take for this episode. I think get those four things going for yourself, and you can lower your blood pressure. You can have a healthy weight, not just now, but for the rest of your life.
Just jumping in on I love the topic that you talk about the support, because I know just for myself on my journey, I had so many questions and I really didn't have anybody to turn to because I was off on my own. I didn't know about the National Health Association, which if you guys aren't a member, oh my God, National Health Association, been promoting a whole food plant-based diet since 1948. Amazing organization, but I didn't know about it. I didn't know about, I just had some books to go through and I didn't have somebody to ask the questions to, where am I going to get my protein from? And there's so much stuff on the internet that's out there that is just so contradictory to some of the things. Like if you go look at paleo or keto, things like that. And it's like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? And it's like, you just don't know. So as a newbie, there's a lot of information out there that is just so overwhelming. And to have somebody to guide you through, I kind of compare it to being like the Wizard of Oz. Like you've just killed the witch. She's under the house. You've got the ruby slippers on, but you need someone to get you down. I mean, when you first come across the scarecrow, he doesn't know anything. And he's like, yeah, can I just go with you? And then there's winged monkeys, and then there's witches throwing, fireballs at you. You need someone to say, hey, there's a witch down that path. Let's go a different direction. So I think I wish I had somebody, like one of us to help me, guide me through this, that I didn't have to spend like 4 or 5 years just researching it and getting my, foundation. So yeah, you nailed it. I think getting someone to help you and guide you is mission critical.
The issue of community support and having a support for the change. I've been running retreat centers even long before there was an internet. And what really fed those retreat centers is that people would keep coming back because they had a community of people from which they could get that support and get that ongoing information. So finding that now in your life, whether it's a focus group online or somebody that you trust to do this kind of work, I still think is of major value to people. And we've seen it for many years for people that create the repeat business for retreat centers, that they come just for that sense of community and support. So it's a very big piece, and I'm glad Gareth brought it up. It's very important.
Frank, and even for people who are so experienced, like myself, and been eating plant-based this way for 30 years, I found, reading Jayney's book, yeah, fantastic. learning from Jeanne. I've listened to your course, actually bought your course and listened to that. You cannot get enough of this support which you can get through the internet but you got to make sure it's coming from the right place as well, because there are plenty of people out there selling stuff which is not researched properly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I completely agree with you, Gareth. I think you've got to be incredibly careful about where, the support is so necessary, but, aligning yourself with the right people, I think is absolutely crucial. And if anybody's in any doubt, they can quite happily speak to any of us, because, we've been there, seen it, got the T-shirt and the mouse mat, and the commemorative mug. But, quite honestly, you've got to be very, very aware, I think, that there are a lot of people out there who are sort of willing to essentially sell you snake oil. And so, it's just not worth gambling with your health and well-being. So make sure you're going to, really respected resources. And there are plenty of those out there, including this group, of course.
Thank you, Gareth. That was amazing. I love the big four. So, let's go on to Frank and food addiction, because it's real. Oh my God. It's like a monkey on my back. I know, because I'm the first person to go, hi, I'm Jeanne Schumacher. I'm a food addict. Take it away, Frank.
Yeah, when we talk about food addiction, we have to lay the groundwork with the process of addiction itself very briefly. And there are data that suggest that addiction, especially in countries like the United States, may be the leading cause of death, disability, and crime in America. So when we talk about addiction, we're talking about a big issue. And understand that in the brain, we have a cascade, a waterfall of chemistry that establishes our ability to experience pleasure from the simple acts and joys of life. And I love this idea because it's called the brain reward cascade. And it really is a waterfall of chemistry that establishes our foundation of pleasure. And it involves a number of neurotransmitters that culminate with the output of dopamine, which many people are aware of in relationship to pleasure. So if you really ask people why they do what they do, why they make the choices that they make, they can go into a lot of discussion about influences in their lives, but fundamentally, it's because those choices are affording them some degree of pleasure and survival. Now, the problem is that there are many factors, including genetics, including poor nutrition, including lack of sleep and activity and trauma, that can actually compromise that cascade of chemistry that establishes our sense of pleasure. And then it creates what is the most common denominator in the entire field of addiction. And it's called the reward deficiency syndrome, that the person is no longer able to experience pleasure from the simple acts and joys of life. But when you're incapable of experiencing that pleasure, there are feelings then of anxiety and depression and loneliness, and no brain wants to feel that. So what the brain will do in terms of driving your behavior in that reward deficiency state is generate your attention and direction to anything that can give you pleasure. And that usually leads to self-medication with the 5 major forms of addiction, which are food, drugs and alcohol, sex, risk-taking, which used to be called gambling, and now what we call process addictions, which is everything from shopping to work to internet to all of that. The common denominator of all of those different forms of addiction is what we call jazzing up and trying to medicate the reward deficiency syndrome. And let me just say something, because when we talk about the use of the word addiction, in the field of addiction, it relates to a very simple definition, and it is the continued or compulsive use of a behavior or a substance, and here's the kicker, without regard for negative consequences. So if you're looking in a mirror and you're eating and getting overweight and you're getting heart disease and diabetes and you're putting yourself at risk and you know that, and you're just denying that, that would be what we would call an addiction. There has to be a sense of denial of negative consequence, and you keep doing it anyway. If you drink a glass of wine, we can call that alcohol abuse. We wouldn't necessarily call it addiction. But if you are drinking and putting your entire neighborhood and community in jeopardy because you may kill somebody driving in a drunken state and knowing that or denying that, you are now in the process of addiction. What makes food addiction a little different than other addictions is that you really don't have to shoot heroin, but you got to eat 2 to 3 times a day. So you got to confront that monkey meal in and meal out. And the intriguing thing is there are so many factors that associate with food use that we've associated with dealing with the stresses and strains of life. I mean, I grew up in an Italian household. From the first breath you took, you were urged to deal with any major stressful event by using food as a vehicle for handling and dealing with that issue. It certainly didn't resolve the issue, but you had a problem going through a divorce, have some lasagna, you'll feel better, and you do for a short while. But what it does is it disengages you from the mindfulness of what's necessary to confront the addictive process. Because we now know that in solving an addiction, it's not only the content of what you eat that's important, it's the context of why and when you're eating it. So when we look at food addiction, we're really addressing issues that go way beyond the food that you're choosing. In fact, we can get lost in the food choice. Like so many times people will blame the chocolate or the fat or the food for their weight or their health problem and not look at the mindlessness or the denial that's gone on in choosing food as a vehicle for creating pleasure and stress management. So the key here is, how do you understand more effectively the context of your food use and not only the content of it? And we do know that the truth of the matter is there are things that can reinforce addiction. So certain foods can have their own addictive quality. So we know that sugar can have an effect, much like cocaine, on stimulating dopamine use. We know that when people eat dairy products, there is the casein, the protein in dairy, is converted into several or 8 different kinds of morphine. So there's an addictive quality to certain foods that can actually reinforce the entire process of denial and addiction. So I think many people, when they look at food use and food addiction, sometimes they're only looking at the food element alone, and that can be very important. And that's why when we eliminate salt, oil, sugar, dairy, you're eliminating foods and things that have their own addictive quality. But at the same time, you've got to get into, in a more mindful way, what may be driving that food use. What are you using that food for? Because I will guarantee you, we're trying oftentimes to use food and other substances to solve all the problems of our lives on a spiritual, emotional, and stressful level. And that's not what food was created for. We want to get pleasure from the food that we're eating. We want to experience that. But we also need to look at what we are kind of avoiding or sidestepping with food use for the real issues and concerns that have to be addressed on a more emotional, psychological, and even spiritual level. And we now know that there are ways that we can effectively do that. And there are people that do mindful eating techniques, or they do things with mindfulness and ways to bring people into present time awareness so that they're slowing down the eating process. So they're looking a little bit more at what they're using food for. And I think once you start processing that, you can get at the heart of the matter. You can start addressing the issues that you're trying to solve with food use and create a better and healthier relationship with the use of food. So food is a major addictive component, and it does create major issues of heart disease, weight, and so on. But the only way to effectively resolve that is to eliminate substances that may be triggering other addiction in food, but then spending the time at understanding more effectively the context of your food use. What are you using food for? And we can all do that more effectively.
I know that for me, I personally myself, I know that my whole family is a food addict. And it was interesting that I think Neil Barnard was doing a study. He compared using the diet as recommended by the Diabetes Association and a whole food plant-based. And out of both of those groups that were doing the study, there was a subset of both groups who had issues following whatever the program is, whether it's the diet of the American Diabetes or whole food plant-based. And he found that there was a gene that both these groups had in common. And I was like, wow, I'm like, that's got to be my whole family.
Genetics related to addiction has been known for the last 30 years. In fact, we even know what the genetic malfunction is. It's a distortion of the dopamine 2 receptor allele on the receptor itself. So there is a suggestion in the field of addiction that at least 30% of people with addictive process are dealing with a genetic component, a predisposition for addiction. And it was discovered with alcoholics. And what's intriguing is that you rarely have genetic changes or modifications or mutations in a single manner. Usually genetic mutations happen in a cluster. And what they've discovered is that not only can you have the genetic malformation on the dopamine D2 receptor allele, but you can also find that when you have that modification, that genetic change, you're also processing these foods and substances in a different way that may be triggering chemical changes that reinforce pleasure in ways that they don't in other people. So it's hard to get people with those genetics to commit to the change because when they try to, they just don't feel as good. And so because of that genetic modification, for example, there was a study done on homeless alcoholics in Washington, D.C. many years ago. And many of these people died with alcoholism. And when they did autopsies on them, they discovered high levels of morphine in their blood. Well, they never had morphine. What they discovered is that when they drank alcohol, because of the genetic predisposition, they converted alcohol instead of into aldehyde, water, and carbon dioxide like you and I would, so that we urinated away. They converted it into something called TIQ, which is a synthetic form of morphine. So genetically, they were converting alcohol into an opiate-like substance. And these are the people that when they first drank, they never felt better in their lives. They were never more productive in their lives. So now you come along and say, we want you to stop drinking. And their first response is, you got to be kidding me. This is the best I've ever felt. And so that becomes a tricky component on this process. We know that strongly with alcohol. We are just discovering it with other areas of addiction, but it's a very real component of the addictive process.
Frank, can I ask you, when people like ourselves have been plant-based for a long, long time and getting pleasure from what we would consider to be healthy foods, is that danger still there? Is that trap still there, waiting to...
The story has always been with addictive people or people that have gone through the process of addiction. The statement has always been, once a pickle, never a cucumber again. So that's why they'll tell an alcoholic, there's never a time that you're going to be able to drink because that pattern may be there. Now, what's nice about food is that when we attach ourselves to healthier food and we've created those patterns over a very long period of time, we will gravitate toward those foods, but that person with food addiction still knows in their mind that there are trigger foods for them. They know things that when they gravitate toward them, they have a very difficult time stopping, and they really still need to stay away from those trigger foods. And so to answer your question, yeah, the process is an ongoing one that can go on across a good part of a lifetime. And one of the things that happens in mindfulness with this kind of work is that you do become mindful of what those trigger foods are. And as you create more and more pleasure from these alternatives that are really in your best interest, you are separating yourself and breaking the pattern, extinguishing the pattern of attachment and attraction to those foods and items that are not in your best interest. But once a pickle, never a cucumber again. It's an interesting statement.
I think there's also something to be said about gut dysbiosis and the way that certain types of gut microbes produce, as a sort of part of their metabolic process, actually produce alcohols. And that causes enormous problems for people, even if they're not actually imbibing, they are still functionally drunk. And there's a school of thought that infers from this that this contributes to food addiction in a great way. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Frank.
Yeah, that's kind of a whole new area, and looking at all the ramifications of the gut microbiota on behavior is now intriguing psychologists and psychiatrists in droves, because we now know that mental health, many of these people are even treating mental health and addiction by reestablishing a healthy gut microbiome and microbiota. So your point is incredibly well made. But this is the beauty, again, of eating plant-based, because when the diet becomes plant exclusive, the insoluble and soluble fibers are fostering a population of flora that are creating all of the healthy vitamin, mineral, neurotransmitters from a gut standpoint. 95% of the serotonin in the body, which is involved with pleasure and well-being and antidepressant, is found in the gut, not in the brain. So your point is well made, and where that area is going to go in the balance and treatment of addiction, we know that when people are dealing with food addictions and other addictions, balancing the gut flora with healthy nutritional patterns does help their recovery from addiction. So I think it's a great area and a great observation. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Frank. I love hearing about food addiction, because for me, it's real. And it's not just, trigger foods. It's actually trigger places too.
Well,
I know.
The brain has linkage. It's kind of interesting.
Yes.
You get up in the morning and you have a cup of coffee, you get up, have a cup of coffee, then you have a cup of coffee and a cigarette. Within a very short time, the smell of coffee will drive all of your desire for cigarettes. So the human brain puts that linkage together. So places, locations, all of it is involved in helping someone recover from that addictive process. So that's a great observation. It's very real.
Very much. So thank you, Frank, for talking about food addiction, because it is real. Okay, Jayney is going to be talking about the female hormonal balance, dealing with PCOS, menstrual pain, PMS, all other challenging issues for pre- and peri-menopausal women. Take it away, Jayney.
Thank you, Jeanne. Thank you so much for doing this and getting this set up. I know that we're all getting such really useful information out there for people, so I do appreciate everything you do. So today what I wanted to talk about is actually, for a change, because I often talk about menopausal issues, and I've made some great videos on that topic, which have been proven to be really helpful for women. But what I want to talk about today are those difficulties faced by women who are premenopausal right up to the perimenopausal stage. So this is for everybody who's not yet been through the menopause. So what I want to say, first of all, right at the very, very beginning, is that I will be moving on to talk about certain herbal medicines. And my caveat, as always, is that everything I talk about is research-based and supported by really robust studies. But that doesn't mean to say that just because something is natural means that it's absolutely safe for you. Although what I'm going to be recommending has many, many thousands of years of evidence-based and usage. What I want to say is that there's a small chance that some of these herbs, although they've been used safely for many thousands of years, might simply not be safe for you. You might be allergic to them and so on. So with the information I'm about to share with you, take it, but please, please then do your research and make sure you are not allergic to any of the recommendations. So that's the first caveat. So what I want to talk about today are the problems that are associated with hormonal imbalance in women. So one of the first problems that I see, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it today is I've had so many women contacting me recently with problems that are very difficult for conventional medics to be able to pin down and actually diagnose. And the reason is because women's hormonal systems are so infinitely complex, more so than men's, that it's very difficult when a woman presents to a doctor, a GP, or even a doctor who specializes in hormonal issues, for them to actually say, yes, this is what's going on with you, or this is what's going on with you. I think one of the reasons is because conventional medics are not trained in the same way that we are, and they don't have the same perspective that we do, whereby we are able to step back and look at the big picture, if you will. So we're stepping back and we're looking at nutrition, we're looking at exercise, we're looking at mindset, we're looking at all of those things, everything that Frank has spoken about, that Gareth has spoken about, that you speak about, Jeanne. So, you know, this is where we have this massive advantage over the conventional medics. So what I want to say is that the young ladies that have been contacting me recently, many of them have actually had PCOS, that's polycystic ovarian syndrome. And my goodness, this is a syndrome that is dramatically increasing in incidence throughout the population in all developed nations. So why is that? Well, obviously it's down to lifestyle, nutrition, lack of exercise, absolute horrendous stress management, massive increase in anxiety levels, and so on. So what do we do about that? Well, it's just the same as Gareth was talking about earlier. I feel as I'm sort of, you know, just repeating his brilliant words, but, you know, we've got to get our nutrition right. Whole food, plant-based eating is the way to go, massively reducing or ideally eliminating your exposure or your inclusion of refined salt, oil, or sugar. If you can just make those changes, it is dramatic. It's going to make a dramatic difference to you. Now, the response that I get back from women when I say this to them, because that's my first sort of go-to, the first thing I really want them to look at, is that, yes, but I feel so bad. I feel so overwhelmed. I just don't even know how to get my act together to even be able to figure out how to do a whole food plant-based diet. So it's come to me in the last couple of days, and I've been incredibly busy, as I was saying to you all earlier. I've been incredibly busy with the governments here in the UK, getting everything in order for practitioners to be able to get back to work, to be able to help people. But what's become very, very clear to me is that I'm going to have to sit down and write another book to help women out, because they need essentially a blueprint that tells them how to do this, 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 and this in order to get those hormones balanced, particularly for things like PCOS, because it's overwhelming. You know, the mental state that these hormonal imbalances engender is so debilitating. And we see that right the way through, from PCOS through to simple premenstrual syndrome. And I'm not downplaying it by any means. I myself was a terrible, terrible sufferer of PMS. But then we take it a step further and we go to the really worst case scenario, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is it's actually in psychiatric tomes, and it really is recognized as being a psychiatric disorder, because the problem is the disturbance of hormones is so dramatic that women experience a complete personality shift. They become aggressive, they become incredibly depressed, they self-harm. Terrible, terrible things happen due to simple hormonal imbalance. Now, the wonderful thing is that we, on our side of the fence, with natural health care options, with lifestyle medicine options, we have the answers. Unfortunately for women, the answers do not lie in the field of conventional medicine. At best, women are prescribed anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, they're prescribed contraceptive pills, they're prescribed, sterilization, they're prescribed hysterectomies. I mean, it is unbelievable, the approach. The approach is so misogynistic still in medicine. Medical misogyny is a real thing, and it's still happening to this very, very day. So what I want to say to women is, please have a heart. There is a lot that we can do. So first of all, nutrition, as Gareth rightly said, as you've said, Jeanne, as you know, we've all touched on, a plant-based whole food, SOS-free diet. Get the exercise in. I always talk about the three-legged stool of exercise, which is low-grade aerobic exercise, ideally walking for half an hour every day, day in, day out, no matter the weather. As Billy Connolly, the Scottish comedian, says, there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing choices. So just make sure if it's horrid out there, wrap yourself up warm and get out no matter what the weather is. The third thing is you've got to make sure that you're lifting weights, that you are doing your resistance training. That will make a massive difference to your hormonal status. I was reading a fantastic study that only came out yesterday, and it talks about the way that things change for us as soon as we start lifting heavy weights. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, that lifting heavy weights affects your muscles? Well, actually, what happens is changes happen in your brain first. Your neurological pathways in your brain alter way before your muscles actually change. So what actually happens is your brain tricks your body. As soon as you start lifting weights, you start to think, gosh, this is great, I'm getting stronger, I can lift heavier weights. Actually, that's not really true. In fact, your brain has created better pathways for you to be able to lift heavier weights. This is in the first week or so after starting to work out with weights. And after that first week, then your muscles start to get recruited into the equation, and your muscles start to change. But it's actually your brain that starts to change first. So it's really fascinating, the whole kind of brain exercise relationship. Arnold Schwarzenegger used to talk about putting your mind into your muscle. So if you are working out with weights, what I really want you to do is don't work out with a headset on, just really kind of get into yourself. And when you're perhaps doing your bicep curls or your leg presses or your pull downs, whatever it is that you're doing, put your mind into your muscle, get that mind-body connection going. If you can do that, you're going to reap far, far greater rewards than just simply going along to the gym and doing your bicep curls and listening to, your favorite hits and so on. If you're doing it mindlessly, you will not reap as many awards as if you're really actually connecting your mind to your muscles. So that's that. And then also I want to say to women to get on to the whole mindful exercise track. So that includes Pilates, but we more commonly think of it as Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and so on. Again, it's all about that mind-body connection. And with those forms of exercise, you'll actually also find there tends to be a meditative component in all of that, which again also supports our equilibrium and our ability to be more resistant when we're faced with stressors. And so, of course, ultimately, again, as I mentioned at the top, it's anxiety that is seen in all of these hormonal disbalance or imbalance syndromes. So if we can start to think about managing our response to stress, and by doing things like the relaxation response, don't forget I've got a free download for you on my website in order for you to actually be able to learn how to do all of that. So if you can manage to integrate all of those things, it sounds like a lot, but it actually isn't. Once you get it down, once you get a system going, as Gareth was saying, once you've got a system going, actually all of these things are really quite easy. It's just a case of actually doing it. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on some of the medical herbs. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions at all?
Well, I just want to comment because when I was in my early 40s to mid to 40s, I started peri-menopause. And I started also developing migraines for the first time in my life. So my general, physician was like concerned. And so she sent me to a neurologist. And he put me through about 6-8 months of massive tests, from sleep study to brain, everything. Everything came back perfect. And he's like, oh my God, there's got to be some kind of tumor because you just don't start migraines. And he literally had me so scared. My kids were teenagers at the time, and I really thought I was going to die. I'm not kidding. And for the stress that I was underneath from worrying about what's going to happen to my children, because I was a single parent, and I had two children, 2 teenage children. What's going to happen to them? I mean, literally, I was going to see a lawyer to try and set up what would happen if I were to die, kind of thing. And I went to my OBGYN, and she says, have anything changed? And I said, yeah, I started getting these migraines. And she's like, you're perimenopause. I see it all the time. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You need to talk to the neurologist. He had me dead. So I think just compartmentalizing and trying to look at the body as compartments as opposed to, hey, that's one piece, a very complex machinery, high performance vehicle. But yeah, wow. I mean,
do you know, Jeanne, I'm so sorry that you went through that. And it's actually medically indefensible that your neurologist took this approach, because we've known in medicine for thousands and thousands of years that even in the last couple of 100 years we've known that there is a connection between migraines and uterine problems. And yes, it is a known thing that women tend to get migraines at the time of perimenopause. And it's very interesting because ergot, which is a mold that grows on rye, has been used over the years in conventional medicine. A version of it in conventional medicine has been used as a treatment for migraine, but also treatment for uterine contractions and inducing those. And so, it's not exactly rocket science, and it is actually known in conventional medicine that these two, there is this strange brain uterus connection. And so yes. And I think that, there is, because of the uterine brain connection, I think this is one of the reasons why we tend to get so much dysphoria around the sort of the premenstrual period, at that time of the month, because, everything is just going completely and utterly haywire. So I've actually dug out some of my top herbal approaches that have been shown over millennia and in research studies to be beneficial to women. So would you like me to go through those and discuss those and give our listeners some thoughts about how they could integrate these into their lives?
That would be amazing. If you can just give us your top list, that would be incredible.
Of course, Jeanne. Yeah, okay, so here we go. What I want to talk about first is a herb called Artemisia vulgaris, which is its fancy name. It's also known as mugwort, is its common name, also known as wormwood, actually. And it's been used for millennia in traditional Chinese medicine to prevent miscarriage. And also it stops excessive heavy menstrual bleeding. And it's widely used as an antiseptic, and in traditional Chinese medicine, they speak in terms of a cool or a cold womb, and being a cause or related to infertility or subfertility in women. And mugwort can actually be used to treat that condition. And also it can head off an impending miscarriage. So it's incredibly useful in herbal medicine as well, but it must, in that situation, must be used in conjunction and under supervision of a qualified medical herbalist. I cannot stress that too much. You really mustn't sort of mess around with that at all. The next thing is that, I just wanted to next touch on how to use mugwort, because it can be used very, very easily. You just make a tea of it. You soak 1 teaspoon in a cup of hot but not boiling water. You can sweeten it if you like with a little bit of your favorite sweetener. I tend to maybe let a date or half a date soak in the water, because it's quite a strong flavor. The other really interesting thing, though, about Artemisia or mugwort is that if you are one of those people, myself, who's really interested and intrigued by lucid dreaming, so that means the type of dream where you're aware that you're dreaming and you want to kind of direct your dreams in a particular direction, mugwort taken before sleep will actually allow you to have lucid dreams. So it's quite a handy little herb. The next herb that I'm coming on to is one called Alchemilla vulgaris, or also known as lady's mantle. It's a really beautiful, delicate herb. It's rightfully called a women's healing herb. It has a lot of tannins in it that make it very valuable in curbing heavy or excessive menstrual flow. It also actually, I know I'm trying to concentrate on pre-menopause and perimenopause, but actually it's also really useful in menopausal conditions, and it also regulates periods as well. So if you're finding that you're perimenopausal and your periods are kind of really, you don't know when the next one's coming, you can't remember when the last one was, if you start taking Alchemilla or lady's mantle, that will actually help to regulate your periods as well, which can be quite useful, because there's nothing worse. You know, I remember going through perimenopause myself thinking, I've just no idea when my next period is going to be. And, you know, you just don't want to get caught out, do you? So, you know, the thing that women have to deal with. So the other thing that you can actually use Alchemilla for is treating fibroids and endometriosis in women. Now, as we know, fibroids and endometriosis can actually be a major cause of infertility or subfertility. I have found in my own patients that I've been able to treat those conditions very, very well, even after women have been completely written off by the conventional medical profession. So I have treated these situations and these syndromes with herbs, but also with homeopathic approaches as well. And they do work. And so where women have been told, you know, you will never have a baby, they then end up falling pregnant and having happy, healthy pregnancies. So that's one, and I know that really obviously, you know, relates to a lot of the work that you're doing at the moment, Jeanne, with the Pregnancy Advantage. The next herb that I want to cover is yarrow. This is a really good one for reducing heavy menstrual flow if you take it during a really heavy period. Yarrow is really useful for uterine health overall. And the interesting thing is, if you have period pains, it's a particularly useful herb taken in a tea, because it contains salicylic acid, which, as you know, is also found in willow bark as well. It's kind of where we originally got aspirin from. So it's a really useful herb, and, you know, very, very gentle on the system. So you can actually make a really good tea with by steeping 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried yarrow flower for a cup of boiling water. Just let it sit for 10 minutes. Top tip is, if you are making a herbal tea, what I suggest you do is you pour the boiling water onto the herbs, put a saucer over the top of the cup, because what that does is it stops all of the volatile healing oils from evaporating out. It will just simply cause them to drip down and back into the cup, and that way you won't lose the healing aspect or the healing properties of the herb. And finally, I just want to talk about chaste tree. It's also known as Agnus castus, also known as vitex. What it does, it takes a little while. Now, this is the thing. I find it's probably the most useful herb, probably the most effective for regulating periods, dealing with period pain, actually solving premenstrual dysphoria, so the real mental, terrible down or aggressive feelings, the real dark feelings that women can get. You know, I mean, I cannot overemphasize just how bad premenstrual syndrome can be. I mean, I myself suffered from it terribly, and I'm so glad that I don't have to deal with any of that anymore. But, you know, premenstrual emotional stuff is so destructive. It destroys relationships. It is terrible, terrible stuff. So vitex, or Agnus castus chasteberry, it really does deal with this, but you have to give it time. It takes about 3 months. Some women sooner, but for most women it's about 3 months before you'll really see a change. It also really deals with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. I think the best way to take it is as a herbal tincture. You can buy this in health food stores. And people always say, so what's the best dosage? Well, I would always say, if you're taking it as a tincture, it's actually, the dosage has pretty much been established. So follow the instructions on the bottle. If you do that and you take it for 3 months, mark in your diary when you've started taking it, and then, sort of mark in your diary 3 months hence. And then you'll be able to literally write down at the beginning what your symptoms are, and then reassess your symptoms in 3 months' time. And I think you will be amazed. And I find this all the time with my patients. They'll come in with a whole list of symptoms, and then after I've been treating them for some time, I'm saying, and how's your insomnia, and how are your period pains, and how's that rash that you were getting, and how's this? I didn't have any of those. Yes, you did. Here we go. Here's the list. It's amazing, because with symptoms, what happens is that when they're healed, when things are changing, what actually tends to happen is that we forget that we ever had them. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. I've talked far too long about this, but I'm happy to engage. If anybody wants to ask any further questions, I'm more than happy to engage with them, underneath this video, or, via my website.
Oh my God, Jayney, you are amazing. I always learn so much from you every time we connect. You're just incredible.
I want to add just a couple of things if I can, because for decades, and especially in younger and younger people, there's been such an aggravation and use of the foods that we are countering, animal, dairy, refined sugar, but all of the so-called hormonal and endocrine disruptors that are environmental toxins generated from fossil fuel derivatives like BPA, glyphosate, all of those things that have incorporated into the culture are notorious for hormonal and endocrine disruption. And we're seeing younger and younger parts of the population being exposed to larger and larger amounts of those things. And oftentimes it's overlooked. But even meat, dairy, refined sugar generate hormonal and enzyme changes like aromatase, which disrupt estrogen and testosterone levels. So we see a tremendous amount of hormonal disruption and endocrine disruption based on ongoing eating habits and also these environmental toxins that have been imposed. So I think that people need to know that by controlling and regulating some of that, it will help. And the only other thing I want to add is that there is a long clinical history of even using simple things like water-only fasting for dramatically eliminating migraines, fibroids, ovarian cysts, and so on through the process of the autolytic process of water-only fasting under supervision. So for people suffering with some of those kinds of conditions, that kind of clinical application can also have sometimes a life-saving value in a very short period of time. So I think those food choices, those environmental toxins, and even simple clinical things like fasting may add to the benefits that Jayney was elaborating in her discussion.
Thank you, Frank. Again, I always learn from you as well. I'm just going to toss in there the environmental toxins that you're being exposed to, like through personal care products, shampoo, deodorant, toothpaste.
All part of it. That's what I'm saying. All of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. One of the problems that women face if they are not using organic tampons is that the tampons that are the real big commercial brands contain substances that actually make women bleed longer in order to get them to force them to need more product.
Oh my God.
Yeah. There's also another issue because, as we know, cotton is a main ingredient in a lot of these products, is one of the most highly contaminated crops there is on the face of the planet. So if you are not buying organic tampons, then you are exposing yourself internally into and putting these products inside yourself with a very, very, very thin membrane. So, it's worse than if you were eating these products. Your exposure levels are horrifically high. So yes, and yes, they are endocrine disruptors, as well as being cancer causing and all sorts. So, a lot of women say, what should I do? And I will say, well, if you can use a menstrual cup, that is probably the best thing. You can get a moon cup. Those, there are different brands out there. That really is the best thing, or pads. So yeah, for any of the younger women watching, that's the way I would go.
Well, thank you, Jayney. Amazing as always. I think we could perhaps maybe in the next show continue this conversation because it's huge. It's huge. So let's change topics to going out to eat. First of all, going out to eat is pleasurable. We're going out for social, we're enjoying ourselves, but if you're eating whole food plant-based, it can be a challenge. I mean, the good news is there's more things coming out, more restaurants that are recognizing this, and they may be vegan restaurants. And here's one of the problems is with a lot of vegan restaurants is they'll still use a tremendous amount of SOS, the salt, oil, sugar. And that's how they make the food just amazing. I mean, I've been to some amazing restaurants in New York City that are exquisite gourmet vegan restaurants, and it's loaded with fat, sugar, salt. And when I eat there, I usually get very sick, the next day, because my body's not used to eating that kind of stuff. I mean, I suck it down without any problem, but it hurts me physically. I'm very, very salt sensitive. So it's very hard for me to eat out. So let's just be clear. When you go to a restaurant, they're not there for your health. They're there to make a profit. They want you to come to their restaurant so that you buy their food and enjoy the ambiance within the restaurant. And it's convenient. Oh my God. I mean, I love to have food made for me and prepared for me without question. It's one of the reasons why I love going to the National Health Association conference, because I don't have to ask questions. I don't have to ask questions. I know the food is whole food, plant-based, SOS. End of story. And it's delicious. So, but that's rare. So cooking at home is the best, without question. You know every ingredient that has been used, and you have total control of your meals. You know what's going on and happening within them. But it's not always possible to eat at home. So, okay, there's some apps out there called Happy Cow. There is Vanilla Bean, Air Vegan, Vegan Express. There's several different apps out there that can help you to find them. But let's make sure we think about ethnic restaurants, because most of these ethnic groups started with eating whole food plant-based. So all Asian, yes, they do add some oil or salt, but you can learn to ask, but any kind of Asian, Ethiopian, Vietnamese, Mexican, Italian, Indian. Oh my God, I love Indian food. So good. And, and even fast foods are starting to offer, options. Like, for example, if we're on the road, I know that I can get a baked potato at Wendy's and a salad. And I almost always carry my dressing, when we travel. So it's nice to be able to grab a quick meal, because I love a baked potato. And I just bring some stuff to put on it, because usually the problem with the baked potato is the company it keeps, the butter, the sour cream, the salt and all that kind of thing. So, but that's one of the things you have to be careful of, is when you do eat out, is those hidden animal sources. Sometimes they'll make beans and they'll add a bone broth to the bean to give it flavor, or they'll add other kinds of things. And so you want to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting. So please, one of the best things that you can do is to call ahead. Call ahead and say, I'm whole food plant-based, vegan basically, and I can't have any oil or salt. I'm allergic to them. And that's the key word right there, is to say that you're allergic. In my case, I am allergic to them. I cannot have oil or salt. It will raise my blood pressure without question. Call ahead. If restaurants have time, and I did this, we went to this place in New York City called Blue Smoke. Talk about the antithesis of plant-based living and eating. It was all about, smoked, grilled, barbecued, down-home Southern cooking to, and so I called ahead and I explained, we were going there as a group, and I said, what can you do for me? After she stopped laughing, because that is the antithesis of this restaurant. She's like, yeah, my chef loves a challenge. I'll tell him. And honestly, my plate looked so much better. And the food was, to me, so much better than the other bowls they did at Family Style where we were serving, than what was going around the table. They were all looking at my plate going, how'd you get that? And I'm like, mine, holding it and thing. So calling ahead is huge, number one. And what to order when you go out. Don't look at the main area. Look at the side dishes. Most restaurants will offer baked potatoes, sweet potatoes, steamed vegetables, rice, salads, things like that. Create your own plate, but specify the prep method. Make sure you tell them specifically, steamed, no oil, don't add any salt. And sometimes I forget to bring my own salad dressing, but most restaurants have at least balsamic vinegar, Dijon mustard, and maybe some maple syrup. And so that makes a fabulous, it's 3-2-1 salad dressing. So it's 3 of whatever of balsamic vinegar, whether it's a tablespoon or whatever you guys use over on the other side of the pond. So 2 of Dijon mustard, and then 1 of a sweetener, like a maple syrup. That makes a and you can just mix that right at the table. And I've had them bring little cups of balsamic vinegar, mustard, and syrup, or an agave or something like that, that you can mix right there at the table. And that makes a fabulous dressing that you can do. But I do try to bring my own. So the other thing is to charm the waitstaff. Don't be that pain in the butt person. Just say, hey, listen, how can you help me? What can you recommend? Be extra polite. And when you offer that, they're going to go above and beyond. So I've always seen that. When you're that nasty person that is demanding and they don't want to help you, and they won't, But going out should be fun, and it should not be stressful. So enjoy the company. That's why you're going out. Enjoy the fact that somebody else is preparing your food, and do the best that you can in each situation.
Jeannie, helping people eat out has been a big issue for me for many years. So to take advantage of the diversity of ethnic cuisine, as you brought up, on my website, I have a free ebook that is called The Plant-Based Guide to Eating Out in the Real World. And it has all of those items in every ethnic restaurant that are on our program with pictures and descriptions. That's a freebie for our viewers. So just go on drfranksabatino.com, download it for free, and you've got this beautiful guide, at least for the ethnic restaurants. And like you said, it's not perfect, but why reinvent the wheel? These cultures have been making a lot of whole food, plant-based stuff for many, many decades and centuries. So this helps people take advantage of that.
Yeah, Jeanne, I'd like to pick up on your point of giving the restaurant a challenge. And in my experience, 100% of the time is when you do give them a challenge, the chefs absolutely love it. And they will do that. And any business worth its, worth its salt, any business, that is thinking about the future, is thinking about themselves in that industry, has got to be open to delivering products the customer really wants. And there's more and more people asking for plant-based food and cleaner food. So, I think they're even likely to be more open in the future.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions you'd like us to dive into, message us through our new website, healthchangers.net. Your health is worth working for. Make every bite count. Make every action count. If you need help, all of us here can help you on your journey. Thank you for joining us today.